Hello everybody and welcome back to our brute forcing basic authentication part. Right now we coded a simple banner, we imported the functions and the libraries that we will need, and we also made a simple name equals main part of the program that will run our first function. Now what we want to do is we want to make this start function actually run all the other functions, so we will code everything important in the start function. Then after that we need to also make a function that will actually launch our threads, basically since we will be using threads to perform this, and then we will need to make a function which will actually check if our actual authentication was successful or not. Basically what that means is if we actually got the password right or we didn't. So let us see how we can do that. Now, the first thing that we actually want to do in our start function is simple banner printing. So we want to print the banner first at every running of this. And what we want to do is basically, first of all, count how many arguments we actually want to have. So what do we want to have? We want to have the argument where we will specify the username. We want to have the argument where we will specify the password. We want to have the argument where we will specify the URL to the website that we are trying to brute force. In our case, we will test on my router. Make sure to test on the website that you have permission to test on. And also we want to specify basically the threads option, or how many threads we actually want to run. So let us see how we can do that. Basically, let us try something like this. So we will run the try and accept rule right here, so try, and we will use the getopt library that we imported. So we will use two variables to store this, so opts and arguments equal getopt.getopt, and then argv comma, and then between the double quotes what we want to specify is basically the letters that we will use for our arguments. So for example, let's for the user use U, for the URL let's use W, for the file which we need to store our password, so we need to make an option where we will actually pick a file for our password list. Let's use the F option, so F for file and then T for threads. So what our program will need to do, we will specify the URL with W, we will specify the username for the brute forcing with U, the file that has passwords that we want to use for brute forcing will be F, and then the number of threads will be T. But before we actually finish this command, we need to separate them with two dots, so separate each one of them with two dots, and close the brackets. So right now this should be finished, but since we ran the try command, we need to accept, so we want to use the any getopt error, which we can do with this command, so accept getopt.getopt error. We just basically can print, for example, error on arguments, and then we close this, and then we can use sys.exit in order to close our program. So let us see what we did for now. Basically what we tried, we actually gave to these two variables, we actually used the getopt library, and we set the number of things that we want to specify with our options. We set the username, file, URL and threads, and we also printed the try and accept statement, which will actually print us error on arguments if we forget to specify some argument or something like that. Now what we want to do right now is actually specify what each of these options are. Since our code doesn't really know that we want to specify F to be a file with passwords, we need to tell that to our program. So how we can do that? We can do that simply with this. So let me just press enter. We'll do that all in the start function, so make sure to be still in the start function, and we want to use what we gave to these two variables. So for opt, we use the for loop for opt comma arg in options, or basically in opts. So basically what we used for opt and arg, which is basically variables that we do not really have. This is just variables name that I picked, and in opts, so I could have just typed here I, but it wouldn't make any sense, so let's just leave this. in opts, which is this, that we set to this variable to be, we want to actually select what each of that will be. So, for example, if opt equals minus u, or let's do it like this, so minus u, which is for the user, then let's say user equals arg. Now let's do that for all of these other options as well. So the next thing would be else if opt equals w or minus w, since that is how we will specify the commands. The w is for the URL, so URL will be equal to arg. Then else if option equals to minus f, or let me use the single quotes since I started everything else with the single quotes. Let's call it dictio, or however you want to call it, equals arg. You can just use dictionary or file name. So for example, let's use the pass list. Maybe that is easier for you to actually understand than dictionary. And we want to set that to also be equal to the argument. So, and else if, for the last one, opt equals, and then quotes minus t. Oops. We want to set threads to be equal to arg. So what we did right here is we specified what will which letter mean. So user will be minus u, URL minus w, the pass list will be minus f for the file, and then minus t will be threads. So what we want to actually do right now is we want to actually first of all open the file for reading, since we can't really brute force the passwords if we do not open the file to read it. Now we will open I will just make a simple password.lix password file that we will use for this. It doesn't really matter. We will have to open it, and then we will have to code a function that will actually take an input of our passwords, threads, usernames, and URL. So let us see how we can actually do this. So all we have to do right now in this function is actually open the file. So we will do that with try and except rule, so we actually can prompt users with an error if the file, for example, doesn't exist. If they specify the wrong name for a file, our program will crash. So we want to run the try and except rule. So we'll just type here f equals open, and then we need to specify the name of the file to be pass list, since we specified minus f option to be equal to pass list. So make sure to name it the same right here. And all we want to do is open the file, for reading, since we will be reading from that file for our passwords. Now there is an option to read each line by line. So in Python that is called read lines. So we want the passwords variable, so passwords will be equal to f.readlines. So for example, if we have a program or a file with passwords that is basically 5 passwords long, the passwords variables will be each line of that. We need to specify that in order for our program to know that it has to use only one password while brute forcing. So let us now code the accept function. So basically we want to print can't open that file, or let us actually add this right here to be as an error. Let's also do it right here so it doesn't look like this. We will print all of the errors with the double exclamation marks, and we will print when it finds the password with the plus mark, so we can actually differentiate it. And all we want to do right now is actually call the sys.exit in order to close our program, since the user didn't specify the correct command, or pardon me, the correct program. And right now what we have to do after this, we set our options to be good. So we set all of this, we open the file, we read passwords line by line, and what we want to do now is actually launch our threads that we will use in order to brute force. So we will call a function launcher threads, or thread, which doesn't exist. We will have to code it in the next video, but for now on, let us just see what we have to pass to that function. And basically what we do have to pass is the things that we will use in our program, which is passwords. And what we want to pass to this launcher thread is basically passwords, which is basically the passwords that we read from this program right here with the option f.readLines. We also want to pass the number of threads that we will use. We set that right here. We need to pass the username, or we called it user. Okay, so we called it only user, so we will need to specify user here as well. And the last thing we need to specify is the URL. Now we will code, as I said, this function in the next video. Right now we successfully coded all of these options right here. We need to code the launcher thread function in the next video, which will launch our threads, which will help us brute force our target faster. We will use the thread.start function in that from the thread library in order to do that, and then we will have to code a class that we will use in order to actually perform the attack itself. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope I see you in the next one. Bye!